now I would like to welcome each and everyone for the Vision India Plan Development Assessment. Hello everyone, very good morning. I heartily welcome you all to Vision India Plan Development Assessment. Thank you for joining with us for today.
Collaboration. Collaboration and progress. I now invite Mr. Ravi Kumar, member. Good morning, everyone. I heartily welcome you all to Vision India Plan, Develop, and Ascend. Thank you so much for joining with us by today. Vision India is a visionary summit series that focuses on innovation, collaboration, and progress. I now invite Dr. Rajiv Rai, Member of Parliament and Chief Coordinator of Vision India Summit Series to start this event. No, that's Good morning. Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us at Vision India Develop Ascend, a visionary summit series that focuses on innovation, collaboration and progress. I now invite Professor Abhishek Mishra of IIM Ahmedabad and former Minister of UP government to start this event. Can we have a big round of applause to welcome Professor Abhishek Mishra? Thank you, sir. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Once again, good morning, everybody. And thank you for being here on this lovely Sunday morning. It's a great pleasure for me to stand here today and start a movement that I hope will redefine the country, that will shape what India will look like, what India will become, what the agendas that will be set. The Vision India conference today, the inauguration ceremony for which we are all witnessing, I hope it will be a testament to our times. It will be a foundation for building the pillars of growth and prosperity and inclusiveness for this country and everybody all in it. At the very first step, I would like you to join me in welcoming our very own, a very dear friend and a member of Parliament today, the Chief Coordinator of the program, Honorable Shri Rajiv Rayaji. Please welcome, and he'll take it forward from here. Now I take this opportunity to welcome on the dais a very distinguished name in this country, a former colleague from IIM Ahmedabad, Professor Rekha Jain. Professor Rekha Jain, I'll just give a brief background for her. She's been a member of the board of PNB Gilts and Gujarat Gas Limited. She's been a member of the board of Punjab National Bank, Gujarat Info Private Limited, Telecommunication Consultants of India, and IIM Ahmedabad. She has been a faculty at IIM Ahmedabad for 34 years now. She has worked with international and domestic organizations like the World Bank, Ford Foundation, DFID, Commonwealth, Telecommunications. She has also led conferences on e-governance for political organizations for various governments. She's written more than 50 case studies which are now taught all across the world, been a senior Fulbright Fellowship for Telecom Regulation. It's a pleasure to have you here, ma'am. Most welcome. The next I'd like to request is Mr. Joydeep Datta Roy, Executive Director, Indian Overseas Bank. He's assumed charge as ED of the Indian Overseas Bank in 2024, prior to which he was ED at the Bank of Baroda. He led bank-wide transformation projects called Bob Now. He was head of the integration at the time of amalgamation of erstwhile Dena Bank and Vijaya Bank with Bank of Baroda. He was elevated to the position of Chief General Manager and was posted in the office of the MD and the CEO of the bank. He holds various critical portfolios of the bank today. He has also served as Director of the Board of National E-Governance Services. He has an honours degree in economics from Delhi University and an MBA from Nursi Moji Institute. Most welcome, Mr. Joydeep Datta Roy. Next, I'd like to invite on stage a very dear friend, Mr. Ravi Shankar Gundlapalli. Most welcome. He's the founder of the Mentor Cloud, author and global advocate for mentorship. He has a PhD from the University of Michigan, an MS from Florida Atlantic University, and a BTech from IIT Chennai. He's the author of multiple books, the most famous beings, know your roots. He's written a book called The Art of Mentoring. We are happy to have you here, sir. And finally, we'd like to invite our very dear and a close colleague, Mr. Kunal Upadhyay, who is co-founder of IIM Ahmedabad Ventures. He started and co-founded IIM Ahmedabad Ventures. He's been an entrepreneur. He has nurtured entrepreneurs. He has sought financing for them. He has developed them. He has taken our ventures to the market. He has grown ventures, and he has a big infrastructure experience in the entire ecosystem of ventures. So most welcome on the stage. Shri Rajiv Rai ji, Honorable Member of Parliament, welcoming our dignitaries on the stage. I now invite Shri Rajiv Rai ji, Honorable Member of Parliament, to extend his greetings and welcome for the panel. Over to you, please.
Thank you, Professor Abhishek. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, respected dignitaries, innovators, founders, academicians, and friends. A very warm welcome to all of you. It gives me an immense pleasure to convene this Startup Summit 2025, an important platform dedicated to innovation, knowledge, exchange, and shaping the future of entrepreneurship in India. Today, gathering reflects a shared commitment to building a nation where ideas are encouraged, innovation is supported, and every dream has the opportunity to grow. Today, we are especially honored by the presence of our esteemed leader, Honorable Akhilesh Yadav ji, National President of the Samajwadi Party, Member of Parliament, and former Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh. He will be available here in afternoon super session. His vision for empowering youth, strengthening innovation, and building a progressive India continues to inspire millions across the country. We will be very thankful for his presence, blessing, guidance, and motivation. As a Chief Coordinator, I express my heartfelt gratitude to all the experts, industries, leaders, and participants who have joined us today with an open mind and a spirit of collaboration. This summit is designed not as a one-way lecture series, but as a dialogue-driven, interactive conversation, because it is through discussion that ideas become solution and solution becomes movement. Thank you. Now I hand over to Professor Abhishek to start this session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So let me once again welcome the panel, and we're going to have about 1.5 hours between us answering questions, and then with the permission of the panel, I'd invite the guests present here, students, professors, innovators, entrepreneurs, policymakers, bankers, financiers, all that I see in front, to please be prepared with your questions. If you have something that is compelling enough, note it down, and then at the end we'll have an opportunity to ask the panel those questions as well. So with this, let me start by asking, and can we just say that we'll keep it limited to about 4 to 5 minutes per answer in the first round, and then we'll see how the next round develops from there, right? So the first question, I have that bias coming from IIM Ahmedabad, going to IIM Ahmedabad. So a senior colleague, so that's where we'll start, because we all believe that education is the foundation and the first step for everything. That's what our teachers, our parents have trained us, and that's what you trained me at IIM Ahmedabad when I was a younger colleague working with you. So first question goes to Professor Rekha Jain. And I think a very broad perspective question, but something that, what do you think is the role of academia in fostering a startup culture? And that's a very important question because, the summit that we are hosting today, the theme is startups and how startups are a solution for various problems that we're facing. But the role of academia comes before that. That's like information learning giving. So we'd like to know, through you, what do you think is the role of academia in fostering a startup culture? And is there a way that institutions like IIMs or IITs or any others can have a role in influencing the entrepreneurial education part? Not just telling them, how to run a business, how to excel at managing multinational corporations, but also how to become an entrepreneur. So 2 parts of the question is that what I'd like you to focus on. Please.
Thank you, Abhishek, and also thanks to the organizers for inviting me. And of course, Abhishek and I have gone a long way since his time at IIM Ahmedabad. We've been in touch on and off, so thank you, Abhishek, for thinking of me.
Always.
Okay, the first question that you ask, what is the role of academic institutions in
fostering a startup culture?
Okay. See, academic institutions are the intellectual capital and the scaffolding that any entrepreneur requires in their entrepreneurial journey. Now, of course, the entrepreneur brings the intellectual capital by thinking of the idea and by thinking of the idea that they want to grow into a business. But if you have an academic institutional background to it, it gives you that scaffolding, it gives you the areas around which, how to build up that idea, how to sustain that idea, how to fund that idea, how to make it viable. Because it's not only the idea that matters. I come across lots of students, lots of startups who say, ma'am, this is a very good idea, and it indeed is a good idea, but that's what it is. It is not a viable business in the long run. So how to get that mindset, critical thinking, that allows you to think of that idea in a broader perspective of not only looking at the intellectual capital that has gone into thinking of that idea, but what will it take? Will it take teamwork? Will it take networking? Will it take a legal input? Will it require funding? If so, what kind of funding? What kind of equity structure I should have? So all those aspects of entrepreneurship or startups are not known to many young people. They think, we have this idea, everyone must love it, and why it is. So I think that, okay, relax back. There are many other background things you need to do is what an academic institution can give them the frameworks for. Second, I think that culture comes through the processes the academic institution has. And those processes include, how do you select people? What is your faculty? Are they thinking of entrepreneurship? Do they have ideas which can turn into viable business units? They themselves may not be interested in doing it for their own reasons, but can they give those critical inputs to those students? So that culture of openness, that culture where it is not hierarchical, the culture where you're allowed to fail. And that is very important, that how do you evaluate a student whose venture fails? Do they get a failure grade, or do they get marks for the effort, the thought process, etc.? Because in this world, startups, the hit ratio is very, very low. 2 out of 10 if you're very lucky, or 1 out of 10 if you're very lucky. Sure. So how do you build up that culture of failure, but learning and moving on forward? I think that is what an academic institution should be able to do.
That, okay.
And giving that alumni network. How do I get alumni who have done entrepreneurial work, who've understood the challenges of the real world? Can they bring those live cases to my institution to teach my students what challenges lie ahead? And that culture where alumni are welcome, they share their views, and, after all, they're also taking so much time and effort out of their own space to come to us. So how do we respect that? How do we get them on board? And last point, how do we get industry to be a partner with us? Because we must solve the problems that industry has as a startup. It's not necessary that the startup must only think of original ideas and nothing more. Yeah? So I think I'll stop here right now, but I can come back to more questions.
Yeah.
So
Just a question that comes to mind related to what you just said is the entrepreneurship education. So you,
the second
yeah, can you just extend that part? And also, one thing that I really liked with what you said is how alumni can bring their lived experiences and cases back to the students. And is there any effort, I don't know, maybe Kunal would also answer that question later, is to document those entrepreneurial alumni journeys, create maybe cases out of that, or create video lectures out of that, and so that people can access. And also the mentoring part, we'll probably come to Ravi on that account. But can you just focus slightly more on that net relationship and how entrepreneurial education can be supported with that?
So at a time when startup was not such a hot buzzword, IIMA had a department of entrepreneurship. But I think the time was not right. It kind of folded up into the strategy domain, and I was, oh, okay. And it was long time back, so that time entrepreneurship was not.
When Kunal was not there.
It was, no, it was there all the time, but to think of it as a dedicated field of study and all of that. So entrepreneurship education now will, because we are at IMA and many of the management institutions, we are driven by our placement. Now, so how do we develop? If I develop a course, I offer it, I have all the alumni coming in, I have the labs and everything. But if there are no takers for it, then I cannot offer it at IMA, as you know. That
absolutely.
So that it is both a demand and a supply side. So supply side, I think we have resources, and we have institutions like the CIE Ventures from which we can draw. But I will leave Kunal to answer that part of the question. But yes, definitely an educational focus. Because there's also a myth, ki entrepreneurship, why do you need education? It's your gut feeling, it's your idea, your passion. But life, besides passion, requires the mundane. Your term sheet, did you properly understand it, sign it? Did you understand the other intellectual property rights of other entities that you're using? Did you license it? All of those things, come only through an educational
Just a related last question on at the moment for that is, there are certain institutions around the world, if you look at, in the US and Paris, which are known for teaching entrepreneurship. Now that's almost like a dichotomy. You touched upon that point, that people feel that entrepreneurship is not something that can be really taught. It comes from within, it's a passion. And there are also stories that, for example, a kid starting in a father's garage and building a multi-billion-dollar business. Do you think that skews the storytelling side of society against the idea that entrepreneurship can actually be taught, whereas actually efforts are required? That's one part. The second is, do you think institutions should emerge with a clear focus? I'll not name those institutions, but if we say people who teach entrepreneurship, we all know which institutions come to our mind, that this school is very, very recognized for the entrepreneurship program, which actually develops, curates, nurtures, and has thrown entrepreneurs after entrepreneurs after entrepreneurs, and then serial entrepreneurs as well. So what's your take on that?
So I think it's a very innate requirement of our ecosystem to have an institute or a series of institutions. India doesn't need one, it needs several.
Multiple.
But what has also happened is that, again, the way increasingly the institutes are evaluated by the external world, and hence by the people who enter, demand and supply situation, is that we are mapped on how many papers published, how many courses taught. There is some weightage for number of patents, but all startups don't need a patent. For example, if I was just doing a skilling startup in a particular domain, see, data annotation, I want to do a startup on that, data annotation in the agri field. It's a startup, but it maybe, I don't need a kind of background the way it would be in
patenting activity in that field. That's right.
So therefore, this kind of system which doesn't allow or doesn't give space for evaluating you for the efforts that you put in as an institution. Into, see, because if I have an entrepreneurship department, maybe they can't publish as much, but they are helping
Nurturing
to
more
nurturing
people.
people.
Yeah, yeah.
And yes, you can say, you should develop a research paper out of it, but there are only 24 hours in a day and, so you're focused.
There's only-
So I think that there should be a national movement saying, let us develop parameters which are specific to our country, to our requirements. Publication in a Western journal is so prized, but I don't know of what value it is to my country.
Our context.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Thank
I mean, maybe I've been a bit more critical.
No, but
then,
I think soft skills gap for startups.
Perfect. First of all, namaste, and thank you for having me. It's truly an honor to be part of this exciting summit called Vision India. Because I live in Silicon Valley, but my heart beats in India. So I do come here very regularly. It's so just to happen that I'm here at the right time.
Okay, so happy to have you here.
Thank you. So I define entrepreneurship, I've actually say that it's not a word from French. It's an Indian word from Sanskrit. I've actually written about it called entrepreneurship means antar prerana. If you say it 10 times, you get the entrepreneur.
Right.
So like Madam said, our role is to ignite the genius. The prerana is the genius, that inner fire. And academia should really focus on not prepare students for jobs, because that's a very Western mindset. Right? If you do this, you will get this job. India, if you go back to very, very early educational institutions or curriculums, they prepared for life, not for jobs. And when you prepare for life, then naturally your natural genius has a way to be channeled. Right? Because if you can teach how to take that inner fire and put it in the right direction. Now, yes, as entrepreneurs, I need to know what intellectual property is, how to read term sheets, but I can always hire other people. But what I cannot, really outsource is that passion, that persistence,
inner fire,
that grit.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So again, ma'am also mentioned about alumni. We do a lot of work with alumni networks because alumni have a great opportunity to inspire students because they have been there, done that. So how do you provide that international network to be able to get connected? Because if you look at the Vision India logo, it's all about connections. I see an electric circuit. So how do we connect our young people, our students, or young entrepreneurs to the right people at the right time? That's what Mentor Cloud does. That's really where the magic is. The connection. Whether it is matrimony or entrepreneurship, it's the connection that matters. So everybody who has an idea, first thing you should think about is, who can guide me? Because if you wanted to come here, you know exactly you should call an Uber or an Ola to get to somewhere. In a similar way, my work has been, how does everybody wake up in the morning and say, who can help me in this? There's nothing wrong in taking help. I've always said that we come into this world independently, we go out of this world independently, but we don't have to grow independently. Be dependent. Surround yourself with people. And you see all the successful people, whether it is Dr. Kalam or Adi Shankara, or if you go back, I recently did a talk on mentorship has roots in Indian heritage. So we have to tap into that. So again, I have a framework which I'll talk next time.
Sure. So let me just pick up from the logo that you pointed out. Very, very important part of the logo is the, I would say, the absolute definition of mentorship to my mind. When we say plan, develop, and ascent, right? That's the formula for mentorship to my mind. So if I'm seeking a mentor for a venture that I want to start tomorrow, or what to do next, then I want to. What I'm thinking is about how do I plan, how do I develop that idea, and then how do I finally ascend into with that idea, right? Can you identify, in your interaction during the course of mentoring people, can you identify maybe the top 3 skills that you think people who have brilliant ideas but lack when they come to you for mentorship, and then that's something that you give them and that helps convert what Professor Rekha Jain was talking about. How do you, an idea is just an idea, and I wouldn't want to ridicule an idea, but there's an English saying that an idea is dime a dozen, right? So the real value comes in translating and planning that idea, developing that idea, and assenting with that idea, the P.D.A. process of the Vision India model, right? What are those 3 skills? And you can mention 5. Just a strategy professor bias to think in terms of 3 or 5.
Always.
Yeah, top 3 forces or 5 forces, yeah. But what are those skills to your mind?
Yeah, so a lot of entrepreneurs come to me because in the media today, we actually celebrate so-called fundraising. So many raised 1,000 crores. So there is an inherent message that unfortunately we send that funding is the ultimate goal to success, right? So I think we should, that's the skill that I don't see in people, that it's not the funding but fundability, right? Are you ready for funding? Do you have the right product, the right market, the right kind of customer understanding, the right kind of, approach? So a lot of and I keep telling a lot of newspapers and media folks, don't celebrate fundraising, celebrate success. And not every entrepreneur needs to be a unicorn. That's again a challenge I see that we have very nicely copied from the Western world. I live in Silicon Valley, and that's why I say, let's get inspired by them, but not copy them. Like ma'am said, we have to develop our own models, because India, for the country to grow, we need a lot of entrepreneurs in millions in tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities. And they don't have to be unicorns. 100 crore, 1,000 crore is more than enough. And that is who we were. At one point in our heritage, we were at 35% of the world's GDP. And unfortunately, after 300 years, we have lost all that. So we need to go back to that. We need to remember that. So a lot of people think I want to build a unicorn. That's the other problem I see is, set the right goals. And the other is what I call coachability. Especially I see in India, Indian youth are just, unstoppable. But unstoppability has to be matched with coachability or being able to listen. A lot of people come and say, they'll find the right mentor who will just listen to them. That's not what you need to find the right mentor who you can listen to. There's a big difference, right? So find the mentor who's going to make you angry and sweat and cry, and that's the person who's going to make sure that you grow. So focusing too much on funding, not being willing to listen, are some of the skills that I find entrepreneurs have to be, set on the right foundation for success.
Do you have a particular approach at Mentor Cloud in how you would approach that question? If somebody came, suppose 3 people came to you with an idea for funding or for mentoring for an electric vehicle 2-wheeler startup, how do you choose which? And you can only fund one, or you can only mentor one. How do you choose that one person? What attributes would he see, would he show, and would he exhibit, and what would you look for that? I think after 3 people, I only have so much time. I'm going to place my bets on that. That's the first thing. And funding point, I think I'm just going to jump on on that with you. But it's almost, ma'am, the same fascination, and Kunal would share that as well. We have at IIM Ahmedabad when we say, do not report salary packages. right? It's all about who got the highest salary package, who's getting that crore rupee job and where in which part of the world. So I think that point when you said it resonated with me very deep and said, that's not what it is about. That's not what startups can be about. It's about creating millions of them, let 1,000 flowers bloom, and let's see what nature, takes its course. Yeah. So can you just comment on that, please? Which three, how do you choose one out of those three?
That's an interesting question. If I could choose all three, I will invest in all of them because,
that's why I placed a limit on what you can choose.
because investment sometimes is a sort of blind faith. Because a lot of people, like I know the investors in Airbnb and Uber and people somebody else's car. Who's going to live in somebody else's home were the questions that people ask. But some people put the money, some people didn't. But ideally, I think if you ask me who I will choose one who is actually coachable or how it's a mentorable. Right? Who's willing to listen to you and who's able to come back to me, because I always test them. My first meeting is always 15 minutes. If the person goes away and never shows up again, that means I'm not going to waste any more time. So who is willing to listen? Who is taking notes? Who is able to come back to me with all the research they could do? Now, 25 years ago, we didn't have ChatGPT or Perplexity, but today they do. So in the example you gave, if somebody comes to me with the EV car, they should know all the numbers. I look for who knows the numbers, who knows the competition, who knows the market. If they don't come, even in this day, 30 years ago when I was going to IIT, I had to go to the library, go find those books and search and stuff. Today you don't have to. The young people today have so much advantage, so much information. So when you come to me, you come for that human element, not for facts. Everything is available. Right? Again, we're going to talk about AI, I'm sure. Right? So it's artificial intelligence or is all there in all the so-called GPTs of the world, but the human context is where you should come to me. Don't come to me for, sir, should I do this idea? You should do all of that at home and come to me exactly, sir, what should my next step be? Okay. And the person who's willing to listen to that, I will invest and I'll spend my time with them.
Okay. But there's a inherent dissonance in that choice criteria. What if, my idea is actually far beyond what anybody's thought about? So wouldn't you miss what we call missing a Vivekananda or missing Einstein or missing a Chandrasekhar in that journey? Chandrasekhar wrote his thesis on a boat between sailing from India to Cambridge and got a Nobel Prize on that 54 or 56 years later on that account, right? So wouldn't you miss that person? So when you say coachability, we are already assuming that the mentor knows more than the mentee. How do you, I know that's not, I'm just giving you an example that suits my case. But how do you resolve that conflict? How do you speak to somebody and what do you look for that spark and say that I think this guy is onto something. Maybe I don't really know so much about it. I'll also put in my homework and we'll connect together. What are those words? What are those phrases? What are those instincts that you will, that will raise a flag and say, oh, this is, I think, an out of the box idea?
Absolutely. And, in reality, we do miss such people.
Yeah.
But such people don't miss being successful. Right? People do miss good opportunities. People do miss. But if you look at the examples you gave, whether it is Chandrasekhar or Vivekananda, they were absolutely, very persistent. They had the fire inside, like the Antarprerana I mentioned. And they would not give up no matter what a mentor says. And I actually say this to all the mentors, it's not about you. Because mentorship is not an intellectual excitement where the mentor feels, oh, I did something great. No, it's about the mentee. It's about being able to move the needle. So if I feel I'm not able to move the needle, I will refer them to somebody else.
Okay.
Right? So we do miss, that's just life. But in general, people who are willing to listen, people who will not give up are the ones that I will spend my time on.
So resilience is what you're looking for.
Resilience, absolutely.
Yeah? Okay. That brings me to Joydeep. So when, so an entrepreneur has gone through his journey, he's had a seeding of an idea, went to a good educational background, has had his mentors, and now he comes knocking on your door, say, look, this is what my degree is or education is, and this is my technical skill, I have this mentor, this is my idea, and I need money now, That's when the pen drops, right? That's when the ball drops. You have to sign on that line, and as somebody leading that exercise for venture funding at IOB, I'm sure you come across that every single day, right? And say, now, how do I decide whether to fund this or not? So, firstly, I would, start with a slight historical perspective. I would like you to bring in and say, what have you observed in the Indian banking's approach to startup funding? Has it changed from what it was, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, or even 5 years ago? And what are the internal debates? That's the first thing I would like to, and everybody wants to understand that. What are the internal debates you're having within your company, within your organization? When you sit with your CMD and you created a position for an executive director level person for funding ventures, what was the thought behind it? And are other banks also, you think, following suit on that line? That's the first part, and we'll get to the next.
So thank you, Abhishek. I think, first of all, let me also state that it's a pleasure to be here. And I think it's a great platform of Vision India that is giving us sort of an opportunity to deliberate on various aspects related to the startup ecosystem. And I think this is a very, very significant ecosystem as far as the country is concerned and how the country is looking forward in terms of its overall vision. So from that perspective also, how this startup ecosystem will play a very big role. I think this platform helps us to sort of bridge that.
Thank you. That justifies the Vision India. Thank you so much.
Thanks, and compliments to the organizing team for bringing that together. First of all, before I come to the second part of what goes into the bank's thought process, etc., let me just pick up from what ma'am said. When we think of entrepreneurship or innovation, it's just not only the power of ideas, right? So while the ideas is there, but from the stage of ideas to the stage of execution and final operations, there's a journey. And I think it's important for us to look at the entirety in its entire perspective and not just concentrate on the power of ideas. So power of ideas definitely is something that that needs to be looked at very, very deeply. And that is where some of the Einsteins and some of the Chandrasekhars could come about. But at the same time, it's important to realize that just having that idea may not really get to the stage where there's a sort of a full-fledged business which is running, right? So, and one aspect that probably the funding investors or the banks or whosoever are the funding institutions would probably be looking at is how are you converting these ideas into business? Yeah. So that conversion aspect is very, very important. And in that conversion process, I think it's important to also look at not just the idea stage, but also what is the uniqueness of that idea, what is the applicability of that idea, what is the reach of that idea, what is the sort of coverage in terms of customers or users who will partake of that idea, and how the startup themselves have sort of plans to actually take it there. So all those aspects are actually important when you actually look at the
So if I can sum it up, can I say, how will they make money? Is that what you're saying?
So absolutely. So at some point in time, it is about running the business and steady state operations. So that scenario in terms of from a sort of an ideation stage to the operational stage, how that planning has been done and how that concept has moved forward is very important for the investors. But before that, in fact, when maybe I can just spend a little on the ecosystem per se. And when we speak of the ecosystem, I think India is actually in a place where, of course, the startup ecosystem is building up, and the growth that is happening is one of the fastest globally. The ecosystem now is powered by technology. So technology plays a very, very important role, because in India, if anything has to operate, it has to be you are looking at scale, you are looking at the population, you are looking at users, number of users. So all of that can be bridged through technology. It's a very, very big sort of a lever. So that is something which is very strong in India, and that is, again, very supportive as far as the whole ecosystem is concerned. Right. So apart from that ideas, I think the entire backbone of technology and the technology stack that is available in India is, again, a great, great enabler for how we look at the startup momentum that's happening. So in all of that, I think when it comes to the banking side, we will look at how banking, or maybe I would look at investing in general, not just from the bank side, but from all investors' perspective. Probably how the technology element is also sort of integrated as far as the execution is concerned of the idea. So that again will play a very, very important role in terms of how we look at from the ideation stage to the operationalization stage. So that remains a very key element of operations in India. That is India specific, whereas in any other part of the world, probably I may not place so much reliance on technology, but in India, technology is something that I will play a very, very big reliance on, especially because it is about scale and it's about the number of consumers and the reachability that is there. And that also is sort of a key driver for success overall. So that is point number 2. As far as the banks are concerned, I think we have grown from a long way from what initial days of 2015-16 when the entire startup movement actually started. From there to now, and plus the entire tech revolution which has happened in the industry. So all of that put together, I think I would say there has been a sea change in terms of approach of the banks, of the funding side. A lot of institutions have come about, a lot of funds have come about. The policy side, a lot of institutions, funds have been put in place from the government side, from private side. So all that, I think, builds up the entire potential for funding. So funding that way is not a constraint as far as I see, as far as Indian context is concerned. So there will be a sort of a lot of avenues, areas for good startups who really want to make it big and who have a good sort of a plan or idea in place to actually take it forward in terms of getting investment and funding. So that is definitely there. But at the same time, I think what is more important is to convince or the potential that is there from the investee stage, from the initial stage to the sort of operationalized stage. So that I think would be...
Sure. Can you just throw some light on, what is the typical interaction you would have when you sit at your board or with the CEO, the chairman, and say, look, I'm representing the venture financing side of the bank. And what is it that you feel frustrated about at times that, probably the traditional banking doesn't really understand or doesn't really get it? Are there moments of such frustrations that, look, this is what we need to do, the India is changing, ecosystem is changing, youth have ideas, these businesses are scalable, I know it in the heart of my heart, and I really want to push it through, but, do you face resistance? Is there a wall? Is there still, that needs to be broken down brick by brick or maybe at one swatch? Is there any such experience you can throw light upon without naming names or whatever you want?
Of course, the traditional way of looking at the bankability of any proposal is to look at past performance. Here we are not looking at past performance. Here we are looking at future performance. So that's the whole shift in the mindset in terms of how you look at a proposal and then how you look at the bankability of that proposal. So that difference is, I think, getting bridged. Also, earlier the focus more was on the hard data, which was again financials, your term sheet, your different types of ratios, financials, etc. But here you are looking at alternative data. And there is a lot of alternative data which is there now in the country, and with a lot of the public data, digital infrastructure that has got built up, the data availability is very rich. So we can have access to a lot of alternative data which can actually provide alternative mechanisms for credit assessment. And that alternative mechanisms is important for us to really look at as far as the next frontier of banking is concerned, or the next frontier of how we look at the bankability of startups is concerned. So I think those are the differences which are now happening.
Sure.
And that is a very, very significant
Shift.
departure from the past.
Shifts. I'm fascinated by the number that you said. You quoted 2016 as when, 15, 16, when things really started moving big time in the startup as ecosystem in India. And, that neatly coincides with the other role that I play as as a legislator and in that role. And you'll be fascinated, you'll be surprised to note, and not many people actually acknowledge this very clearly, that Uttar Pradesh was the first state to come out with an IT and startup policy, and it came out bang in 2016. And we created a fund of funds at the budget level. The Chief Minister approved that, and he said, look, we are going to create a fund of funds of 100 crore rupees funded by the budget. Any entrepreneur comes out of in Uttar Pradesh, we are there to fund it through the banking network, through the banking channels, right? And it was 2016. So, when you said 2016, immediately that thought triggered my mind. But last question to you is, when you talk about the entire ecosystem change shift that you talked about, I see one capability that probably banks need today, and I'm not sure what you're doing to bridge that gap, is when you said the understanding of technology. Most businesses, most ideas, most entrepreneurial ventures are getting technology enabled today. With technology, how do you process do you hire that expertise from outside, or do you have, senior people getting trained in the technological aspect as well, and saying that, look, apart from looking at banks and numbers and the traditional style of funding, I'm also getting trained in technology and see what disruptions can this technology really cause in the next 3 years' time, when nobody really knows. For example, investment in AI technology, video creation using a prompt. Right? Now that example, nobody really knows where it will go, whether it will really turn out to be something or not. So how do you have that technology capability assessment inside now, internal, or you outsource it to maybe an IIT or an IIM Ahmedabad, maybe? I don't know.
No, of course, I think it's a mix of both, I would say. So while
University of Michigan, for that matter.
Yeah. So while the technology prowess of the banking system has also sort of undergone a sea change from what it was maybe 5-10 years back. In fact, I can take a relatively short period itself. Last 2-3 years itself, it's changed dramatically.
Yeah.
And from what it used to be a manual-driven process, or even on the credit side especially, it has now largely moved into a sort of a automated process where a lot of lending itself is done in an auto mode, straight through process, and with business rule engines, criteria, which is the system reads and then automates the entire loan decisioning. So all that has gone for a great significant transformation as far as the banking side is concerned. So there are now new credit assessment mechanisms, which is not balance sheet based, it's cash flow based. Right. And it picks up data from your bank statement, your ITR, your GST, and with all that, it is actually able to actually determine what sort of credit requirement a person should be having, and plus at the same time, what I was mentioning, use of alternative data. So that alternative data also comes in handy when you actually look at a person's bankability. So all that is now getting built into the new models of credit assessment,
right.
So which is in-house. But at the same time, there is also a sort of a partnership leg, because when you are looking at technology and deeper use of technology, and plus deeper use of data, data is something which is now universally available. And there are different repositories of data in the country, and you need to tap into that. And at the same time, there are various firms, various organizations who can actually use that data or bring out more meaningful uses of that data, which
Sure.
a bank may not be able to do.
Okay.
So it's important for us to actually partner with them.
Right.
So as we keep partnering with them, it's a win-win
It
for
grows.
both.
It
And
grows.
plus we can better do the credit assessment accordingly.
Okay.
So that's how we are.
So you're saying banking is changing at its very core as well, about the assessments that they do and the techniques that they apply. Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you. With that, saving the best for the last. The penny drops, Kunal, now, right? So we've talked about what education can do. We've talked about mentoring. We've talked about what the banks are saying they're doing. And but you've been an entrepreneur. You've nurtured ventures. You've nurtured entrepreneurs. You've seen, you've co-founded and you were the CEO of what we call I Am Ahmedabad Ventures. Multiple ventures across, day in, day out, meeting with them, living with them, nurturing them, caring for them, motivating them, mentoring them, educating them, and maybe also helping them with their financing and funding models, right? What do you see? Is it what's being said on the stage? Do you see that does that resonate with you? Do you see reverberations when, young venture, entrepreneurs come to you? What's your first reaction to what the reality is really?
So I'll zoom out a little bit, Abhishek, and thanks again for getting us all together for this wonderful conversation. I'll zoom out and zoom into the question again.
Sure.
When I zoom out and I look at the India today, there has never been a better time to be an entrepreneur. And I'll be very honest in saying that I've been saying this now repeatedly for the last 10 odd years. And it gets better and better every passing year. And I feel that today is the best time ever to be an entrepreneur. And entrepreneurship can be defined in multiple different ways, as Ravi talked about. It doesn't necessarily need to take the startup definition or a high technology driven entrepreneurship definition. I Am Ahmedabad, as one of India's leading business schools, has produced some fantastic entrepreneurs. Even in times when technology was not necessarily the biggest differentiator for these enterprises. I mean, we've had people who've gone out and set up pharma companies producing generics. We've had entrepreneurs who've created chains of hotels which had nothing to do with technology. But increasingly, technology will have a very critical and important role to play, as some of the other panelists touch upon. And that's going to be very often the way for you to scale. I mean, we've seen how Ola has scaled on to become a tech hotel company, while the other hotel companies will continue to be a brick and mortar company. If we look at the last 3 odd decades, the entrepreneurship or tech entrepreneurship, and India as a country has always been an entrepreneurial country, right? I mean, most of Indians have been self-employed. Whether we call it entrepreneurship or we don't call it entrepreneurship is debatable, but India has been self-employed, running small mom and pop shops. But India came of age when the software boom happened in the country. What were we doing there? We were leveraging the cost arbitrage that we as a country could make happen. And we produced the Infosys, the TCSs, the CTSs, many of these Patnis, many of these phenomenal companies that India produced. But these were solving large problems in the global context, whether it was rising out of Y2K or other pieces. The next leap, which happened, the second wave of entrepreneurship, as we call it very often, is the little bit of Indian entrepreneurs coming back from the US, learning some of the skills that that they've gained in the US and Europe, and creating what we shouldn't shy away from calling copycats. If there is an Amazon working, let's create a Flipkart here. If there's something else working, let's create the equivalent here. Nothing wrong in people drawing inspiration from those and creating ventures which are going to capture large markets in India, but India was still not producing the products. These were still largely Me Too type businesses being captured or copied from elsewhere and being created, and we produced some phenomenal success stories thanks to the large Indian population that we have. Once technology started making inroads, mobile phones started making inroads, things became much easier for you to order, the supply chains became much easier, the infrastructure started becoming much easier. The last decade, India has seen some phenomenal product-led companies getting created. Unfortunately, if you look back in these 3 waves that we talked about, which is the software wave, which is the copycat wave, or some product-led waves, there is not sufficient intellectual property that was getting created in the country and commercialized. But now as we speak today, and we are talking at the back of the government of India having announced the ANRF, RDIF, multiple interventions in those directions, I feel that India as a country is now capable of leapfrogging and producing innovations which are going to be globally game changing. Indian institutions, and I'm going back to the first question that you asked, Indian academic institutions have an all the more important role to play because you have the responsibility of preparing the future entrepreneurs. I mean, one can also have a long debate around whether entrepreneurship can be taught or not, but everything has a playbook. Yep. Entrepreneurship, again, is a factor of multiple different things. One, it is the mindset. And educational institutes can play a phenomenal role in creating the critical thinking mindset, risk-taking mindset, through case studies, inspiring entrepreneurs to take the plunge. The second most important thing that academic institutions have a role to play is to bring the necessary structural thinking in an entrepreneur's mind. And we've seen enough instances, even from IIM Ahmedabad, and I'm happy to be quoted on this, but some of the brightest students graduating out of IIM Ahmedabad get fascinated by their own ideas. We touched upon that. They get so fascinated by their ideas as if a eureka moment has hit them without even putting in the effort to validate the idea sufficiently. So all of these can be structurally taught to the students, and this is what we as an institute have been doing. But the most important thing is that, entrepreneurship is very often a lonely journey. It cannot happen by an entrepreneur being by themselves. The good old saying is it takes a village to raise a child. We need the academics here, we need the mentors there, we need the investors here to all be coming together and enabling this to happen. But the most important thing that we as a country need to do, which I think we've to a large extent been laggards on, is to break this myth of creating our institutes of excellence. We've got a great, take the example of Ahmedabad as a city, right? We've got and we were just touching upon it, we've got the best design school, we've got the best management institute, we've got one of the IITs, legal, we've got pharma institute, we've got, you name it. But these guys don't talk to each other. Best innovations will happen at the intersection of people coming together and co-creating. Unless we can make that happen, I think our aspirations to be one of the top economies within the next N number of years is not going to see the light of the day. And academic institutions have a great role to play. Everyone else needs to come around together to make that happen. Now, answering that question, I partly answered it in multiple ways, but yes, answering that question, today if you ask me, Abhishek, yes, entrepreneurs, and I've been doing what I've been doing for good 19 years now. When 19 years back people used to come to me with a great idea, I used to very often worry whether there will be the necessary ecosystem to enable this idea to see the light of the day. We will have self-doubt in our ability to actually help such an idea out. But things have phenomenally changed in the last 2 decades. Today we are backing companies in space tech, walking up to us, and Ahmedabad is a very interesting example of these institutions coming together. ISRO being there, producing some fantastic entrepreneurs who walk up to us, because it's also interesting to know that most business failures, most startup failures don't happen because of a technology failure. They usually happen because of managerial failures. Most often because of a business failure. Sometimes you fail to market your product right. Sometimes there's the product market fit issue. So many different aspects that we feel we are able to overcome and unlock. But to answer the question, reverberations, yes, we are proud to see Indian entrepreneurs thinking of problems that we never thought that people would be thinking, and kudos to the entrepreneurs for really taking India to the next level because of the entrepreneurial thinking that they're bringing about.
So when you think about, when an entrepreneur comes to you, and if he wants to break up the journey into 3 parts, how do I plan to go from here? Where do I plan to grow from here? How do I develop this idea? And how do we ascend? How do we grow? The typical growth strategy story that we talk about. So what's your advice, in terms of the plan development and ascent story to an entrepreneur who comes to you today with any idea, for example, I'm not going to take an example, but just, something that classifies for everybody, the students sitting here, the entrepreneurs sitting here, what would be those steps when you have an idea, and, Professor Rekha Jain touched upon that idea, Ravi touched on that idea, Edie Sab touched on that idea. The question is, don't get overexcited about an idea. The idea is, we talked about earlier as well, as dime a dozen. It's not necessarily, every idea is not a eureka moment, right? It's not going to change the world, probably. But what do you need to put around it? What do you need to, how do you plan on that idea? How do you develop that idea? How do you plan the ascent or the growth story? And then decide whether this is the idea that you want to have, or the idea you had the day before yesterday was probably a better idea, or the one that you're going to have tomorrow, because probably they are coming up with ideas almost every day, right?
So again, very, very, very interesting question, and I'm going to invoke some of what we learned as a student at IIM Ahmedabad. I don't know whether as faculty you guys use the same lingo, but we used to. But
we are aware of the lingo.
Yeah. So, again, I mean, the most important thing that you talked about, Professor, was that there's nothing in an idea. There are ideas a dime a dozen. It's all about execution. The most important thing that we as an organization insist upon, emphasize upon, is to put your idea aside for a few weeks, for a few months, as the case may be, and do the contextual familiarity. I mean, I don't know whether you guys use the term CCCF, which is conceptual clarity and contextual familiarity. It was very important to have the contextual familiarity of where are you operating. The interesting part is ideas almost occur to most people, in their showers or sitting on a pot or wherever it might be. And everyone thinks bathtubs. Everyone thinks it's a eureka moment for me. But most kids, especially youngsters, do not have a very strong grounding on how the industry works. So what we insist on, unless you're coming from an industry where you've got deep expertise, you've been able to identify a big gap, we push you guys to replicate the process or the ideal process that you should have gone through to come up with an idea, which is park your idea, talk about the industry you are in, figure out the entire value chain, who captures how much value in the value chain, who are the competitors in each of the segments of the value chain, see what the gaps are, and then you really develop a little bit of a knack for where the big opportunity lies. And this I would broadly classify as the planning stage of an idea coming to us. The most important piece there is to be dispassionate.
Step back.
Be dispassionate about your idea and understand the context. Once you've understood the context, once you figured out that you truly believe in idea, and there are so many fascinating tools that exist today. I mean, whether it is design thinking, whether it is lean startup, there are so many different tools that business model canvas and so many others, and no longer the old school porters and those become less relevant at this stage. From the planning stage, when someone is moving to the development stage, we insist that this process in itself be a very iterative process, which is you shouldn't be sitting in your room and building a code out. And very often we give the example of Dropbox. How many of you have used Dropbox?
Everybody.
Almost everybody should have used Dropbox, but the interesting part of Dropbox is the idea came to them very easily, but they didn't go about developing the product. The concept of a minimum viable product for these guys, which is you creating something small that you can go out and test. We pushed these guys to create it, and for everyone's benefit, when Dropbox did it, you know what Dropbox minimum viable product was? They actually just created a video and put the video online saying that, hey, we are thinking of creating this product, or we are about to launch this product. Would you be interested in subscribing? And they got such phenomenal response for the product. And I mean, this is very often used by Kickstarter as a strategy. People put their idea out there and see whether there'll be enough takers. So we insist that the entrepreneurs build out or develop their product in a very iterative way. So rather than being in a silo, go out, spend as much time with the customer, think through what feature is most important. Because again, I mean, going back to the very important point that Ravi somewhere was making, is that there is, there's great team, but more important than the team is the market itself. A great market will pull the product out of you. You don't have to be the best team. You just have to be entering the best market at the right place at the right time, and the market will pull the product out of you. So that will only happen if you're going in and spending a lot more time with your customers and co-developing. That becomes an important part. When it comes to Ascent, when the product market fit is beginning to happen, when the customers are beginning to call you or write to you saying that, hey, why don't you come and roll this out for us, is when you start feeling that the product market fit is beginning to happen. Right. That's when you double down, that's when you put put the accelerator pad on and try scaling it up, take it to angels, take it to mentors. The critical piece in this entire journey is to always be customer centric and always think of co-creating this with customers, but at the same time, co-creating with the other stakeholders, whether it is investors, whether it is mentors, whether it is your professors, academics who will show you the mirror as it should be. This process of co-creation is what will make folks succeed. I'll stop here with the last sentence. In today's world, Professor, what would also happen is with the advent of AI, a lot of our entrepreneurs would think all answers can be achieved using AI. I don't need to go out and talk to customers. I run something and it'll pull out everything. That's not how the world will work. AI will allow you to create products much faster, but it will not give you the pulse of the customer. For that, you will have to build relationships, continue to have the interpersonal equation with different stakeholders. Entrepreneurs, you should know, the enablers of entrepreneurs, you should know that it takes a village to raise a child. Unless we all come together, we will not be able to raise our children who are going to create the future of India.
Well, you talked about stakeholders, multiple stakeholders, and one stakeholder that, again, coming from my bias for regulation and legislation, is that you missed on is interacting with the regulators. How do you ensure compliances? How does, when he creates a financing product, how does he make sure that it complies with Basel norms or it complies with what the RBI is saying and what the, MCLR is going to be around? So how do you nurture when somebody comes to you with, for example, space entrepreneurship you mentioned about, right? Ahmedabad has a brilliant ecosystem around that, the National Physics Laboratory, the design, the communication, ISRO, so on and so forth, right? But how do you, is that something that worries entrepreneurs a lot today? Do they feel comfortable approaching the regulator, approaching the local administrator, the local politician, or the local government office for those approvals and processes? And how do you nurture around that? How do you tell people that, look, and that's such an important, stakeholder, right?
So it's a tough question to answer.
Easy one?
No. I wish it was easier to be an entrepreneur. The regulatory framework has been largely created keeping in mind the larger companies, larger businesses, and therefore early stage entrepreneurs, startups find hard to navigate the entire rigmarole. However, I would say that over the last 2 or 3 decades, the governments have done their best to make things easier even from a startup standpoint, more so in the recent times than before, when the throughput of startups from the ecosystem has also increased. We keep hearing, sitting in Bangalore, we keep hearing very often from the science of software industry that the reason that they succeeded was because government didn't know that they existed. And operating under the radar, they managed to scale it well. Had they been over-regulated, it would not have thrived as much as it did. Unfortunately, it is not the case today. Most segments are regulated. That is where organizations like us play an important role. This is very often about pattern recognition. There are the few administrative simpler ones, MCAs, etc., that a good CA/CS can take care of. But then there are the more complex ones. I mean, how do you navigate SEBI? How do you navigate RBI? How do you navigate if you're doing something in the fintech space, if you're doing something in the space sector? The good part in all of this today is that the government has taken notice of what is to be done. So, for example, if you are an electronic information technology company, the government of India itself has created sandboxes which allow you to navigate this process more easily. I mean, space is a perfect example, right? Who would have 10 years back thought that the government of India would be relying on startups for some of the mission critical plans that are coming up from the government of India? And today it has changed, and government has set up InSpace as a body just to help navigate all of these things. So BIRAC, again, is a fantastic example of how biotech regulations are being very easily navigated because the government is at the forefront of helping it out. So many of those interventions are helping, but pattern recognition by players like us to identify learn from the mistakes from the past is critical. I mean, I'll call it by drawing an analogy. I mean, think of a startup journey as a expressway. You need to be moving at a really fast pace, but there are a bunch of potholes. If you're doing it for the first time, you'll most likely hit the pothole because you don't know how to navigate around it. But the fact that we've done it multiple times over, every time we know that where is the next pothole going to come, which allows you to just kind of navigate it or circumnavigate it somehow.
Then you can plan around that. Yeah, okay. Thank you. Brings me back to Professor Rekha Jain here. A fascinating point that comes across here, and I think what Kunal closed with, I'll just pick up from there. Very interesting point, and that got referred to, though not explicitly, was that regulation lags legislation, industry. Right? Whatever is happening in the industry would probably be a demand, something coming out, a need getting born in the society. But the legislation not being there, regulation not being there. Especially you look at, for example, issues like deepfakes today. Deepfakes through AI, right? Or cloning of voice of, let's say, Lataji today using AI, for example. Now, obviously, there's no legislation because this was never around there, right? So as an academic institution, I think there's a very, very critical role, especially an institution like IIM Ahmedabad or others, to play there, where to bring to the notice of the regulator and the powers to be that say that document, maybe like maybe create something like an Institute for Future Studies or some such vertical at IIM Ahmedabad or anywhere else in the country and say that, look, these are the things which are emerging on the horizon that the government, administrators, legislators, senior members of the politicians, chief ministers, prime minister, they should be aware of and say that, look, this is what's going to change. Are you thinking about it? Yeah. So, and remember another anecdote I'd like to pick up with what he just said about, software industry doing well. Software industry doing well only because the government was not involved. We had this discussion for the Center of Telecom as well that we established at IMA, that, the telecom has done such a brilliant job in India because the government really didn't realize that it was such a great industry or such a big industry. So how do you react to that point that, how we can sensitize as an academia, where what government should be doing and to make sure that the legislation and regulation does not lag too much. It will lag to a certain extent, but, how to, like Institute of Future Studies is an idea that comes to mind.
Yeah. Thank you. So one of the things that you mentioned, I don't now recall who mentioned, but yeah. See, the need for a multidisciplinary approach to developing such kind of future-looking regulation. It cannot happen from the Department of Technology or Science and Technology or Telecom or IT.
That's where academia comes in.
Yeah, and that bringing together the legal aspects, the business aspects, and also the technology aspects, So what is the meaning of a token? How do I, what does it mean? And how do I develop training programs around that? So that is looking at the future, how do I develop this institution or series of such institutions. And these today, we must be in a world where we are not looking at funding for a building and all of that. We need to get away from that mindset also, you know.
Sure.
But I think many of the times, these are even simple things, Abhishek, which really bother me as the citizen of India. I work in the telecom space, and now what is becoming of great value, besides the cellular spectrum, you know, which saw the rise of so many mobile phones and all, is now the unlicensed spectrum. Okay? Great bands of unlicensed spectrum are being put to very, very good businesses, innovative business model, innovative technology. But these have to be declared as unlicensed by the Department of Telecom.
Yeah.
Now for them, they feel that, you know, we had a Supreme Court judgment that said all spectrum must be licensed. How can we? So those are things that I think that's where the role of policy makers and governments to work together, and maybe academia can facilitate that.
Sure.
Because we come from a neutral stand.
Yeah.
It's not that because I belong to this particular party, I'm saying.
No,
So you know, that neutrality is very important.
Absolutely.
See, a lot of reason why we got many training programs from the government was simply because IIM is a neutral platform. So irrespective of what government is and what the ideology, we continue to function.
Yep.
So first part is multidisciplinary. How do we bring it? And I think the role of a very visionary thinking person, maybe like a Niti Aayog or somebody there, to bring these institutions together. Because many times as I go to the law institution in India,
Right.
they may not work with me, you know, necessarily.
Sure.
But if there is a kind
Mandate
of
from the government,
mandate or a framework,
Yeah.
they may happily work.
Sure.
So that's one thing. Second is, how do I, train the bureaucrats, you know. I'm not saying that, I would not like to club all bureaucrats together. They are great bureaucrats,
Absolutely.
you
Some
know, who
brilliant
see
people,
this,
yeah.
you know, who see this. But we are talking about people down below who should also carry that thing forward and run with it, you know. And this whole thing about, you know, CAG is going to raise an issue. And, you know, I'm not saying we should not be audited, but,
Right.
you know, a more proactive approach. I don't know how to bring about that change.
Sure.
And who can bring that change about. Because at IIM, we often give visionary frameworks, all of that, but then, you know, when it gets implemented, they say CAG.
It's just the same,
Yeah.
right.
So I think that is for us as citizens to bring about that influence, that change, that CAG should be there more as a, you know, check, but not as a constraint.
Sure.
To do things.
Right.
You know, so that's
To innovation and to what people want to do.
yeah. And
Right.
second is, you know, there has to, when we set up such institutions, being a democratic country, you know, there's a lot of answerability, accountability that these institutions have to provide. And that is where the, you know, the development of matrix, or how are we going to see it, what time frame will it take, you know, because that's also an entrepreneurial journey for the country.
Sure.
As a whole, you know. So who's going to mentor us into it? Who's going to fund it? And how are we going to run it?
Sure. I have a related question. How do you encourage students to engage better with the regulatory and the political setup? Because many times the bureaucracy, the political class is viewed with a certain lens of skepticism.
Yeah.
And, you know, you hear a common phrase among youngsters today, ki mujhe rajniti se kya lena dena. Whereas politics is what determines every single thing.
Yeah.
Every single penny that will get spent, every single policy that will get determined and legislated is actually emanating from politics. So how do you create that sensitivity, realization among students and youngsters that, look, we need to engage with them, we need to guide them, we need to train them, we need to be on the right path to determine our policy makers so that the policy is in the interest of the country as a whole. How do you sensitize your students to that as an academic institution or as an academic person?
So many times we've created, first of all, we've created these programs where many of the regulators or the policymakers can come on board. At least the enlightened ones will come on board and raise this. And I think we need to do it at a much greater scale. I must say we are not doing enough of it. And I think just as there's a need for, as parents, we feel that we have to change so fast to keep up with what our children. Bureaucrats and politicians also have to change very fast to respond to the Gen Zs that are coming into the market.
My question was also from the perspective, that part, yes, I understand, that it's our responsibility as a politician or as an administrator, as a bureaucrat to go out and do that. But as an academic institution, how do you inbuild that sensitivity in the minds of the students that, that's also a variable that they're consciously thinking about of managing?
Yeah.
Not just the product market fix, but the product market government fix. Fit.
So see, there are so many entrepreneurs, even in the social entrepreneurship space, technology entrepreneurship space, who have worked with the government in bringing about changes in regulation. We need to bring more of such people to highlight not the technology part of their innovation, not the social part of the innovation, but also how to work with the government. It's a very important aspect. You need to many times maybe educate, but have the patience and, bring them on board. You have to see why it makes sense to have them on board, because they do have the expertise, they do have the vision that maybe as an individual I don't have for the country, for solving the problems. So I think much greater interaction through maybe case studies,
dialogue, discussion,
through such more Abhishek Mishras coming to IMA to give sessions, and others to see how this change can be brought about, so that there is no, that I don't have anything to do with politics. Okay, don't have certain things to do with certain aspects of the political environment. But you can't just put it.
Yes, you can't close your eyes to that.
Exactly.
It's like the sun shining out there, and you close your eyes and say there is no sun.
Okay,
correct. Perfect. Thank you so much. I'm going to jump to Ravi Shankar here. Ravi, what do you think? In terms of the discussions we've had here. And obviously, mentorship comes at every stage. It's not, I'm sure you've talked, I've seen your book, I've seen your lectures on Adi Shankar, and even an Adi Shankar could be a perfect example for mentorship today, right? A CEO needs mentorship. A chief minister would need mentorship. A chief secretary would need a mentorship. Even probably, the very senior most level, chairmen of the boards and politicians, everybody. When you see how different are the challenges, so at the moment we talk about planning, developing and ascending, but suppose you've grown there, you've been there, you've reached that spot, and you're successful and the world is shining light on you. At that stage, as somebody said, I think Kunal said, or this came from Joydeep, that it's a lonely journey. The role of mentorship there is extremely critical, and far more critical, I would say, than at the planning, developing and ascending stage, because that one decision can make such a huge difference, right? So what would you say that, one is I would like to shed light on how open are people, the very, very top notch people, to the idea of that somebody can mentor them as well. For example, CEO coaching and CEO training. I did some of it when I was at Ahmedabad and otherwise as well. But do you see that coming happen often in Indian context? I know it happens all the time in the West, and you spend so much time in the Silicon Valley, so not there. But in Indian context, does it happen? What more can be done for it to happen? And what is it that you would tell a CEO today of a multi-million-dollar organization, at least not billion, if on mentorship?
Perfect. In fact, I would say that this culture of mentorship is actually inherent in India more than everywhere else, right? Because this India, I've traveled around the world, this, Guru Sishya Parampara is so strong in our country. In spite of occupations and wars and so on, the reason that our culture and everything is still strong and sort of thriving is because that we all believe that we need a guru to guide us.
Sure.
Right? What does guru mean? One who removes darkness. And entrepreneurs, we're dealing with darkness because we're going into an uncharted territory. We're not doing something that other people have done. So this inherent belief that you need someone to guide us is very inherent in our ethos. So we should take advantage of it. Now, in my book, I define mentorship as a human-to-human transfer of wisdom. Now, I'm sure you'll all agree with me, there is a lot of wisdom in this country. A lot of wisdom. How do we tap into it? So, again, I see that people get confused by a coach and a mentor. We need both. I need a coach to make Ravi the best version of Ravi. I call it someone who can ignite the genius in me. At the same time, I also need a mentor who can share with me what has worked for them, what are things that I should do, or what are some of my blind spots. So when it comes to transfer of wisdom from somebody who has been there, done that's called mentorship. And you also need someone to really look at what really is the superpower of Ravi, of superpower of whoever, right? So we need both. So I think, and again you mentioned, so CEOs, it's a lonely journey, because if I go and complain as a CEO to my team, they think I'm weak. If I go and complain to my board, they will say, okay, let me replace the CEO with somebody else. So who do I go and complain? Who can I be vulnerable in front of? The only person I can be vulnerable in front of is the mentor. I can cry, I can complain. So we all need someone who we can be vulnerable in front of. And that's what, if you can be like that, that's where growth happens. Vulnerability is perfectly fine. The struggle is fine. A baby is born after a lot of struggle. Sure. So entrepreneurship is struggle. It's nobody should say, oh my God, I have an idea, let me go get funding. Entrepreneurship is struggle, but struggle is what makes, amazing things. So whether you're a CEO, you're a professor, I kind of believe that throughout your entire life journey, you need someone. Or at least, in my book, I talk about build your own personal board of mentors. The companies have a board of directors. If you are the CEO of your own life, you need a personal board of mentors, somebody to guide you on your personal life, on your professional life, on your financial life. We need other people. Why not learn something from other people? If they have made a mistake, don't repeat it. Make new mistakes.
Sure. Perfect. I'm reminded of two lines of favorite of mine, that the peaks might look glorious, but life grows in the valleys.
Absolutely.
Nothing grows on the valleys. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Very well. Okay. Coming to Joydeep. One thing that I'm sure in the light of all that we've discussed, growing in the valleys, and I'm sure you'll find funding a company which is already in the valleys and not at the peak slightly more difficult than ideating about it. But tell me this thing, when you were speaking and the things that have come out here, I noticed a subtle difference in the way that you used the words banking versus investing. Right? Now, this is the classic difference that we, in academia, we like to call the difference between funding and financing. Right? So, given the context here, startups, propensity to fail, ideas, hugely driven, fires in the belly, passionate movements, planning, developing, assenting, and trying to, have a vision across India, and as Kunal mentioned, the Born Global today, globally relevant solutions coming out of India. How do you put a number to that? How do you scale that? And how would you think of it as a difference between banking versus investing? Now, is that still a different trajectory? Are there still different activities? Or you see that they're going to merge as we go ahead?
So, I think I would still put some difference here between investing and banking. One, banking is more a real world, right? So steady state operations. So you have actually matured enough and then come up to a stage where you are actually running the business on a steady state, and then for running a business also you require financing. So you don't need finance to grow only. You also need finance to actually run a business. Sure. And running a business requires working capital, requires various other term loans or other aspects, execution loans, etc. So that is one aspect of it, and that is where banks predominantly come in. The investing stage is where you have a stake, and at that point in time you are actually passionate about building the business from an idea stage into a sort of a blown up proposition, and there it's more sort of taking the prototype into real world execution. So, and at that time the thought process is very different. And the thought process when it comes to a sort of steady state operations is actually really different. So there will be some difference. So
and we need to respect that.
So that I think we'll need to respect. And when it comes to the banking side is of course looking at the risk element in a much more different way than the risk element of a sort of an investor. The investor is of course able to take a little more risk than the bank because at that stage it is part of his sort of gut feel also along with that of the entrepreneur.
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
he participates in that sort of a
Co-evolving, co-partnering as a
he sorts of co-partners with that story. So from that angle, his risk perception is much more different than what the banking risk perception is. So the banking risk perception will definitely be a little more conservative than the investor side.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is something which is a reality, and we need to
And
accept
we just
that.
call a spade a spade.
Yes,
We
we call that as spade.
Okay,
Yes,
perfect.
of course. So that is one. But at the same time, I think banks are now more and more, as things are evolving and things are getting more better in terms of the entire ecosystem. There's a better sort of a visibility on what the startup is doing, and it's becoming more and more transparent. Data availability is there, so banks are participating more in the early stages also. Earlier it was not there, but now you see banks even at an early stage also coming in. Banks are actually now also participating in the incubation, with the incubation
Stage as well, angel
incubation
investing
stages
stage as well.
also.
Okay.
They're having MOUs with the incubators, with the accelerators, and some of the mentoring work, some of the sort of hand-holding work is also being done by the banks.
Absolutely.
And the incubators are also sending the startups to the banks.
Right.
And that is part of the arrangement where they send the startups to the banks to get their accounts open, to get some of the steady state operations started through the
and
banking
there's so
system.
much relationships that a bank can open up for an entrepreneur.
Absolutely. So that's another
venture.
aspect.
I think that's something that I'm sure at IMA Ventures, that's one part of the question
Yes.
that I have
So-
with Kunal.
So absolutely, that's another aspect where I think the bank's role is changing. It's
Yeah.
not just
Yeah.
financing, but it's also connecting the
dots.
startup to certain other
Yes.
ecosystem players which are important for the
Because you have the entire
startup.
network with you.
And we have the network, we have the collaborations, etc.
Yeah.
And I think it's more a collaborative banking that's now happening rather than only the solo banking. Earlier, which was the sort of banking that used
Sure.
to be.
Okay.
Now it's more a sort of a collaboration between various players, between fintechs and banks,
Yeah.
between regulators, between various other stakeholders, between investing community.
Sure.
So all of that, AIFs all put together. So all that is coming into play as part of a larger ecosystem. So that's why I think the role of the banks is changing from
Evolving,
being just a financing organization to also playing a larger
Ecosystem player.
role in developing this.
To an ecosystem player.
Ecosystem
which
player,
integrates
yes.
everybody. Okay, perfect. Kunal, that brings me to a very important question that sums up this whole relationship network. You know, for example, if I was advising IMA Ventures today, I would say use the banking network. To have, to help them open doors because they have a huge network in place. I would use, Professor Rekha Jain and say you have had so many students who are doing brilliantly in the chosen field that this this guy wants to start a company. Can you, ma'am, please give a call? And anybody, that she calls. Or we can ask him, he would have mentored hundreds who would have risen to dominant positions in their industries and verticals and ecosystems. Can you do that, right? But having said all of that, I want to ask you 3 specific questions, right? So answer those and place yourself in the context of, it's a vision for the country. Startup is the idea. We're thinking in terms of 3 trajectories, 3 lenses. How do you plan? How do you develop? And how do you ascend? And the idea is, what do you see the future in terms of funding models going ahead? Do you think they will change? They will evolve? Picking up on what Joydeep was just saying. What are going to be the sectoral focus for venture creation startups in the next 3 years? I don't want you to go to beyond 3 years, just to stick to 3 years and say what's the sectoral focus and what is the stage of investments that people would like to enter at? Would it be angel? Would it be investing, funding, financing, and so on and so forth? These 3 parts I would like to answer, please.
There's an easier way to answer the question, and then there is the harder way. I'm going to try the harder way to
Please
answer
do
the
that,
question.
yes.
AI is going to be the biggest disruptor that our generation, and when I say our generation has seen the internet, we've seen telecom, we've seen automotive, we've seen gas connections, so many different things that our generations have seen that our previous generation had not seen. Of course, the Gen Zs have seen internet onwards, but with the advent of AI, a lot of what we are talking about is going to be significantly changing and impacting or impacted at a pace like never before. And this will have an impact on the first question, which is the funding models, for example. I increasingly feel that just like in the consulting world, the analysts are beginning to cease to exist, just like in the software world, the software developers are ceasing to exist. Similarly, in the venture capital world, in the investment world, teams taking a decision will cease to exist. Again, I mean, sorry for saying this, but the funding industry is full of intermediaries.
Yep.
There'll be a significant disintermediation that AI will bring about in the coming 3 to 4 years, 3 to 5 years, where the source of money itself will be able to figure out where to deploy, how to monitor, how to eventually exit. So that's a big, massive change that's going to happen in the funding environment. Maybe there will be a decrease in traditional VC models. There'll be smarter ways of deploying capital, much solo GP funds as people are beginning to talk about, wherein one person is himself the fund manager. Maybe it will move all the more towards one person managing their own money and deploying it very efficiently. The second piece that is also going to happen is and this is not a good outcome which AI is going to bring about. I mean, India as a country, we very often talk about the need to be producing 10 million jobs a year or whatever the number is. AI will have a massive dent on this ambition. Because the need and startups is a case in point, right? There are now beginning to be solo employee unicorns that are beginning to emerge, where you don't need to employ people. You can pretty much be running businesses all by yourselves. In the Indian context, I feel that AI will also play this role of causing some job losses, especially in the startup context, and startup all the more because startups are a way for people to do things more efficiently versus the traditional way of how things work. But this would apply to many sectors. And since you talked about the sectors, and now I've forgotten the third question, I'll ask it again.
You already answered that one.
Oh, I have.
Yeah,
Okay.
It's an investment idea.
So there are multiple sectors which will see massive changes in the coming 5 odd years. The top that comes to my mind is healthcare. AI will see phenomenal revolutions come about. Examples are in mental health, in diagnostics, in education. I mean, I increasingly feel that education, more so, and I'm going back to the original conversation that we were all having, as IIM Ahmedabad, if I look back, we were created, 70 odd years back, primarily to produce general managers, as we call it.
GMPs, General Management Program.
And the goal there was that India needed a lot more of managerial professionals who would help or play the roles in the Tatas and the Birlas or big industries at that point in time. Including government, yes. Today, the need is going to be to produce more entrepreneurs, and these entrepreneurs will need to be more AI driven. So the nature of education will significantly change, not just in higher education, but early education as well. So, I mean, massive disruption that I feel would happen within the next 5 years in the education sector
as well. Okay.
The thing that excites me the most beyond these roti, kapda, makan opportunities like healthcare is the deep tech stuff that is happening in the Indian context. I mean, space tech is a case in point, semiconductors is a case in point, industry 4.0 is a case in point, some phenomenal work that is, biotech is a case in point. AI will really propel innovation in these segments, and a lot of that would happen in that space. But I mean, AI is going to be a big horizontal. If you are not adopting AI, and I mean, sorry for saying it, but including as bureaucracy, including as governments, including as politicians, you stand a big risk of being disrupted.
Sure.
And therefore AI is going to impact
all ecosystems. Yeah, okay. Ma'am, you want to add? Please.
I think when you mentioned AI, I think one of the things, when we think of AI, we think of deep tech and all of that, which is a fact, no doubt. Also, we have to think of the employment we can generate for our people, all of whom are not going to IITs or engineering colleges, but rural women. Are there entrepreneurs who are exploiting the annotation of data sets for the Indian population for their healthcare?
Absolutely.
Or the agri-tech. A lot of agri-tech is very specific, solutions are very specific to the Indian context, the soil thing and what kind of pests are there. But I don't see enough, entrepreneurship.
And startups coming in that space.
Startups coming in that space.
Perfect.
While it's very, very, I see people saying we'll use this platform, that AI platform and do this and that.
curate
But
something.
I think there's also basic work that we need to do for our country.
Yep.
And I think that's where, that again is a place where maybe not IIMAs, but some entrepreneurship,
Absolutely.
some things
Yeah, yeah.
can
Something that
help
gets created new.
educate people that this is what is required. AI doesn't mean just,
Or
using.
you could start curating an Institute of Future Studies, and we'll all be
Absolutely.
happy to contribute to that. Well, thank you so much for that insightful discussion. And I think we started with the question of what startups can do. And I'm very happy that actually the logical conclusions came to that stage. We've identified sectors, right from where AI as probably a dominant force on minds of everybody. I think that helps us set the agenda for Vision India, conferences. Maybe we could have the next conference on AI itself and think about how we plan, develop, and Ascent can rise from there. So thank you to the panel for highlighting that as a very important subject that dominates your minds and attention. We talked about two important aspects: how AI can be a disruptor and how also AI can be a enabler for employment, for generation, for agriculture, for other spaces, for mentorship. Mentorship cloud, I think, is something that we can immediately take you to the cloud stage. Financing models you talked about, how more of them can be used artificial intelligence to weed out the noise, and then you can step in and make sense of that, right? So with that, I think we close the formal part of the session. I'll be more than happy to take a few questions if anybody in the audience wants to ask some. Can we please get mic to the gentleman here in the front? And I'll be really happy if you ask one question to one specific panelist, because we don't really have a time to go around with everybody. So if you address your question to one person, that'll be the best, please.
No, it's more of a comment, and when you said on the rural. Taking them to the whole model of MSMEs. Similarly, we are now working with 5 banks in Karnataka to fund 100 FPOs and taking them from production to processing. So my thinking here is more to say that, how we can partner, collaborate and work on the whole mass of rural entrepreneurship and looking at giving them more access to capital, or you can say working capital. That's what the thinking is. So I'll be in touch with you, all of you, to see how we can work together.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Any questions? Yes. One.
Good afternoon. I'm Badruddin Khan. There are few points which I need to make to the quality mind sitting here. I spent 37 years with Government of India, having different roles. What we did in different ministries, and especially in the Ministry of Minority Affairs where I was there, I was in charge of the skilling. So what we did with the skilling, that we used to skill the children and also give them a small loans to start their own small ventures. So my question is to the people sitting on the dais is how important, and you, Mr. Mishra, you've been in the role of legislature as well, that how important is the role of legislatures reaching out to the people with these schemes of the government and making them job ready, these people, these young children, because India lives in the villages. So how many IIMs and the IITs, there are children after the school they are unable to reach to those institutions. The role of legislatures, and when I say executives includes the policymakers and the administrators, to ignite the young minds and bring them to the fold of business, entrepreneurship, and create their own livelihood. Thank you very much.
Okay. The question is for me, so thank you for that question, and I'm happy that you brought that up. It is coincidence that as a legislator and as an elected legislator, as a minister in the cabinet, we were the first state in Uttar Pradesh to create a skills development policy in 2013. We created that. We sought help. But again, where do we find a mentor? So we sought help from Ramadurai Saabji, founder, chairman of TCS, who established TCS in India. We sought his help. We lived with that. In fact, and we created a document which later became almost the benchmark for the skill development policy that Government of India adopted later after 2014 and so many other things that were launched. So absolutely the role of the legislator at a personal level and at a government level is both very, very critical. Government level, drafting legislation, policy, skilling, rules, procedures, manuals, grant procedures, approvals, what you will allow, what you will disallow, what's a positive list, what's a negative list. You're aware of all of that, having worked with Government of India anyway. So that's something which is important. At a personal level, legislators have a place of trust and lovability in the hearts of their constituency, at least, right? And they're meeting hundreds of people every day. On any typical day, you probably meet 50, 100 people, 200 people, at least in a state like Uttar Pradesh, as an MLA. That's your opportunity to take those schemes that you think are relevant to that person, to him, and then correct them. Let me give an example. We established a Raymond Center for cutting and stitching at ITI in Lucknow. And anybody who came to me with that problem and said, look, I'm looking for a job, I would say, why don't you go and train yourself at the Raymond Institute? Raymond is teaching how to sew shirts and coats and blazers and pants. So obviously they're doing a brilliant job. And you will learn a skill that you can then make money out of. And hundreds benefited from that. So yes, I agree. It's a huge role, very important role. All of us need to do it better. Any other questions? I can take maybe one or two more. Yeah, that's one and that's two. That's it. Yeah.
First of all, thank you for this insightful discussion.
Thank you.
My question is basically we cannot think about the startups without the incubation.
Can you tell me whom your question is targeted to? Just one person.
So maybe the Ravi sir or ma'am can also answer it better.
Just one person I request.
Ravi sir.
Okay.
So it is more about when we are talking about the incubation centers. Okay, in India, we are still strive for that. We have only 1100 incubation center. China has 16,000. And US has already 3,400 something. With their population, they are much better into the condition. How we are planning for these incubation centers? Secondly, acceleration centers are also very important. Since we grow after the incubation center, how we are going to accelerate our new generations which are coming for, and the fundings, after the funding, how we are going to accelerate that.
Okay. I think, Ravi, the question is to you, but maybe Kunal can also pitch it because it's more relevant for him. Yeah,
I'll answer philosophically. In fact, I've written about it. Incubator, the actual word comes from when there was a lot of child mortality at the turn of the century. The idea of incubator was make sure that the child is protected. So I've written about how to reduce entrepreneur mortality rates. So I absolutely agree with him that incubation centers have to be almost in every district. Right. In fact, recently I was in Hubli in Karnataka, where I was part of the entire Deshpande startups ecosystem, and I was telling Dr. Deshpande, who was a good friend of mine, we need that in every district, because incubation, just like we have every hospital as an incubator, every district should have an incubating center to make sure entrepreneurs don't sort of prematurely die. And while Silicon Valley celebrates, 95% of entrepreneurs fail, it's okay, that's a very venture capitalist view. But for a country like India with 1.4 billion people, that formula will not work. We have to increase the entrepreneurial success rate to at least 10%. And incubation centers are the idea, are the solution.
Okay. Kunal, you want to add maybe a quick line to that?
Yeah, again, the way I look at it is I will, just like most folks shouldn't get fascinated by their own ideas, I would not get fascinated by the concept of incubators or accelerators. They serve a purpose. As Ravi pointed out, I think of incubators and accelerators as a process for de-risking and propelling a startup. Incubators come in early where the risks are higher. As long as there are mechanisms that exist to de-risk these enterprises, it should be sufficient. Unfortunately, incubators very often get seen as physical infrastructures, and we've seen enough of these physical infrastructures getting created across the country and underutilized. And therefore, I as someone who often gets consulted by some policymakers, I do my best to convince the government not to spread their limited resources thin. Don't think of it as a spray and pray. Think of centers of excellence being created. Maybe a city should have at best, or some of the, and this needs to be a hub and spoke model. Maybe our metros need to have large hubs which are serving, or our state capitals should have a large hub which are serving the small spokes that exist. The unfortunate part also is that the 1100 incubators that you talk about, if we look at them very carefully, we would not be able to list 1100 great startups that have come out of them. So we need to take it with a bag full of salt and kind of structure some of these things the right way. But de-risking is important, scaling is important, so I 100% agree with you, but solution is something that we need to think through.
So startup survival rate is something that we need to do. We had one last question here. Yes, please. I don't have time for this.
I represent the defense industry, so we are in the industry for around 20 plus years. I myself served in the Navy for around 10 years. After that, in the last 10 years, we are serving UAE defense for supply of components from India. So we are part of Make in India. So now the question is that we built a startup. It's called TTL Defense Services. It's called Technology, Transformation and Leadership. So we wanted to build the gap. Now we don't have skilled people in the defense procurement domain. We have institutes like IAM who is giving opportunity for the defense personnel, like IAM Indore is running CCM P.D.A program for defense officers. IAM Ahmedabad, Lucknow, Bengaluru, all premium institutions have. So now the challenge, if you see the last year defense exports in India, Make in India for the globe is 3 billion. We touched 3 billion, where in 2023-24 it was only around 700 crores. So our industry DPSU partnership with the private industry partnership is fast growing. So there is a need for people in the defense procurement acquisition domain to be trained to make them understand what is the MOD structure, how defense procurement happens. We have institutes like CDM, College for Defense Management, National Defense College. We have Defense Institute of Advanced Technology. We have a lot of Rashtriya Raksha University for the bureaucrats and defense. But we don't have a similar facility for the private defense industry so that they can train their manpower, so that we are all aligned. So do we have any plan for the academia?
So Professor Rekhajan, I think that. So new MDP maybe.
Yeah, so first of all, there are these programs that you mentioned that most IIMs are conducting with. But then there is a very specific need that you've identified. I suggest that if such programs don't have to be open to all the public, because the demand may not be there. There's a demand from a particular segment. So why don't you write this proposal to some of the institutes that you think that can serve this purpose?
Definitely.
And they will then respond.
Yes, there was one comment like everybody cannot go to an IAM or an ISB. So at least train the trainer kind of a program.
Yeah, so you must put up your requirements and needs.
Which will be the body we should be approaching to IAM?
Yeah, I think we can talk offline.
Yeah, right.
Please, I will approach.
After this.
So I'll just add in here, again, defense is a perfect. You were talking about sectors which are highly regulated and how do you navigate those. I think defense has done a fantastic job in the last few years with IDEX. I'm sure you are aware of IDEX. I think it makes a lot of sense for you to reach out to IDEX, that this is a need. And again, I mean, for everyone's benefit, public procurement is the biggest unsolved problem in the startup ecosystem. I mean, we can keep talking about deep tech, this, that. At the end of the day, many of the customers will be government. And it is very good to see, and I mean, this is still in wraps, but the government is currently working on a new public procurement policy for startups. Once it sees the light of the day, some of the challenges that you're talking about will automatically get solved, which is the supply side of the problem being solved. You still need to solve the demand side of it to make sure that you understand, but nothing beats if the government can change itself so that procurement for you guys becoming easy versus you having to learn the government way of procurement. But IDEX would be the body that I think you should engage with.
Okay, can I have a closing question here?
Yeah, I just also want, I see a lot of young people sitting at the, lot of young people sitting at the back, because the Vision India is for the young people, really, to make sure that India becomes a fully developed nation in the next 20, 25 years. So I want some young people also to ask a question if possible.
Hello, sir. I'm Professor Murthy from JSA Science and Technology University, Mysore. Right. So my question is, because I'm an academician for long years, and I have seen that the students' ideas would come, and these ideas would remain at design and some testability side. But when I try to implement the ideas towards entrepreneurship and taking all the entrepreneurship, I basically understand as a leadership. Entrepreneurship is a teamwork, and entrepreneurship is risk-taking, just like that. So when it comes to such arena, the students or the freshers back up. So you aptly mentioned that engaging the students with political machinery, bureaucratic machinery, bankers machinery. Yes, that was an apt idea to engage students to take up entrepreneurship in the right perspective. Madam and all the people there. So how we can speed up this risk-taking ability such that they really understand the industrial ecosystem from academia to the industry point. Otherwise, they back up at some point without even understanding the hardship of entrepreneurship. That's my question.
Take that question and we'll close with that.
So, of course, we discussed some of the points that you, the question that you raised, we had discussed some of, during the course of the discussion, that this is sort of it will have a sort of a collaborative effort by various stakeholders. So there will be education, a different type of education for entrepreneurship that has to be built in at the academia stage. There will be a lot of collaboration sort of models that will have to be built in at the sort of incubators level and the accelerators level. So that itself will also enable a sort of a skill building of the entrepreneurs who are and their skilling, etc., of the different aspects of entrepreneurship. And later on the mentorship part, which Raviji also talked about in terms of how the mentorship can also play a role. So all that has to come together, and that itself will enable the better risk taking and better skilling of the entrepreneurs who are getting into this field. So that is one. And I think in all of this, I think skilling is coming out to be a very, very important aspect. And that skilling is not just the skill of the entrepreneur only. It is the skill of all the other participants in the ecosystem also, which is equally important for enabling this entire ecosystem to grow. So while it is the skill level of the bankers, the skill level of the mentoring participants, even mentoring itself is a skill. So you cannot just, anybody cannot just go and start doing mentoring. So all of that has to be developed as a part of our overall wholesome package. And then only, I think, the future lies there. So skilling, I think, is important that we take as a focus area. And when we speak of skilling, the startup industry itself can do a lot of work on skilling. And that's why EdTech, and that's why EdTech is becoming so important. So that will be a very, very big sector for startups in the days ahead, where startups who are engaging in skilling activities, because the entire aspect of education itself is changing into from a knowledge-based sort of an education to a applied-based, skill-based sort of a methodology. So that itself will be another startup focus areas, which I think.
Perfect. With that, I think we don't really have time for any more questions, but I'd request the honorable panelists to be around here, when you join us over lunch. And anybody has something specifically you want to ask a particular panelist, please, I have your permission to allow them to approach you so that they can discuss more on that aspect. And with that, let's close the session. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It's been very lovely. Once again, thank you to the esteemed panel here. It was really kind of you. Thanks Rajiv ji, all the organizers and the team here. And once again, let's hope Vision India, Plan, Develop and Ascent will find deeper roots and reverberate intensely and smoothly with all of you. Thank you very much. Jai Hind. Sharp. Thank you.